It's time for Inside BBI with John and Eric live. All right, well, welcome to a special edition of Inside BBI with John and Eric live on a Sunday morning. And I'm going to start this off by saying Streamlabs sucks. This will be the last time that we use it. If it glitches, slows down, whatever, just know I'm going to nuke it after this show, and there will be a different provider going forward. So with me, as always, Senior Editor of Big Blue Interactive, Mr. Eric Kennedy, and then we have a special guest, Dave Del Cole, Scouts Honor. We got somebody else who could talk the draft with us. He will disagree with us because I know I'm going to say things that people aren't going to agree with. So first off, gentlemen, thank you for coming on. We're good to go this morning. It's water. It's too damn early. I don't need to be labeled an alcoholic if I drink a beer at 10 o'clock in the morning. So, but thank you, Eric. I know let's tee it up a little bit of how we want to bring Dave in, and so some folks can understand we're probably going to avoid specifically spending the entire show on pick number 3.
Yeah, and I apologize to everyone who's out there. We don't know what's going on with Streamlabs. We didn't have problems for 2 months or whatever we've been using it for the live streams. In the last 2 shows, it sucked. So some of us are blurry, some of us aren't. We can't figure it out right now. We don't have enough time, so we apologize in advance on that. So I don't know if I'm blurry. John looks blurry to me. Dave says we both look blurry. I don't know what's going on.
But we are clear in thought and mind. Let's move forward. There we go.
So before we start, I'd like Dave to kind of explain his relationship with Dave Tay, who passed away. What year did he pass away again?
2020, 2021, somewhere. I think it was the end of 2020 he passed away. And
right.
Interestingly enough, I met him on BBI. That was where it all began. So if you're not familiar with the Corner Forum, Dave T used to set up, and you guys will remember this, threads where he would just go back and forth with people talking about prospects. And I would start pinging him about that. And eventually I got his email address and we just had a rapport. I would always ask him, similar to the context of the show these days, about day 3 prospects that nobody else was talking about. And he was like, wow, you actually really study pretty deep, which most people don't. So I guess he might have given me a little more time a day there. And then I would just constantly ask him a ton of questions, and we got closer and closer over the years. And then the pandemic happened and we were all locked up. And that was the first time I ever spoke with him over the phone. I was just like, dude, I'd love to chew your ear off one day. And we talked while everybody was in lockdown for an hour and a half. And then he's like, all right, I got to go. He was living in Arizona at the time. He's like, I got to go to Vegas to do something with Alejandro Villanueva.
Nice.
Yeah, it was just like another day for this guy, right? But he was like, I'd love to have you on the show. Would you mind coming on being a guest? And I'm like, dude, that would be awesome. Would love to chat football with you and Paul Crane, who's the former host of the show. So went on a couple shows with him, and then he ended up passing away. He had stage 4 cancer, so it was kind of like a long thing coming for him. He knew his time was short, which is why kind of on his last show of that draft cycle, he was like, look, if I don't make it back, keep on listening. And then I didn't really do anything with it the first year, but then the second year after he'd passed, I was really missing him, thinking about him all the time. So hit up Paul. Paul and I have remained close since I got to know him. He's been a huge help in teaching me about podcasting and hosting and all that kind of jazz. So that's sort of the 30,000 foot view on how I came to know Dave T.
Nice.
That's great. Yeah. And so you've got this Scouts Honor podcast that's on multiple platforms. And every now and then you say Dave Syvertson will come in and do shows with you, and you hope to have him on, you said, coming up before the draft.
Yes. Cy and I normally line up draft week, which is a bit tough. I've been traveling a lot for work this month. I got to go down to Memphis to do a presentation early that week, and I don't get back until like 9:45 on Wednesday. John will tell you flying into Vermont is no small task when you've got to connect somewhere. If you're going to like New York or Boston or Chicago, it's fine. But if you need to go anywhere else, it's a royal pain. You normally get delayed. I just flew back from Florida on Friday, got stuck in Dulles for an extra 3 hours. So can't guarantee that we'll have Scion draft week, but trying to figure something out for the back half of next week or potentially even the morning of the first night of the draft, since we're going to primarily talk about later round picks, day 2, day 3 guys. So that would still be relevant for people to listen to the day of the draft. So haven't totally locked him in yet, but yeah, got license plate guy coming on Tuesday. Got Rick Saratella from All Access Football coming on Wednesday. Just locked in John Schmelk is also coming on Wednesday.
Nice.
So double dipping on Wednesday. Eric's going to come back on later next week, and then might be able to fit Cy in there. So I've had to cram the show this year into 2 weeks pretty much, which is a lot, but it's fun. I enjoy chatting with people. It's cool to hear. I had Paul Dottino on 2 weeks ago right after Eric and I did a show, and Paul knows Dave T well, and he was joking about how he used to have these huge books with every draft report, which that was his big thing. I mean, he was the guy at the NFL draft for 40 something years, and with license plate guy last year, he was telling a story about how when he was really young, he was submitting to get autographs through an intern at the league offices, and that intern ended up being Roger Goodell. And funny enough, Dave T was the one, he told me this at one point, was the guy who gave Roger Goodell his start at the league offices as an intern. So there was just like a crossroad there between me and Joe, which was kind of cool. So
someone should have fired the bastard when he was an intern.
Oh, jeez.
Anyways,
but yeah, no, it's cool, man. Like I don't do this full time. I've just been a nerd. I started to get into scouting when I was like 15. When I met Dave T. Yeah, I started playing football when I was 9, and then I stopped playing in high school. I was a Travis Hunter type, not that I was nearly the athlete of Travis Hunter, but I played both ways. I was a fullback and a linebacker, defensive captain, the whole bit, and my body just kind of wore down on me a little more than I would have liked, and felt like I needed to stop playing. So I stopped playing in the middle of high school, which was tough because football, I was way better at football than I was at school. But then it was just, I wanted to somehow keep the passion for football alive. And then I met Dave T, fell into scouting, loved it, and then have been nerding out on it every year since.
Okay. So I want to set this up before we get into this with 2 things. One is something I've already talked to Dave previously about, and that is I feel like the scouting community often falls victim to groupthink. And you see this every year, and people still fall victim to it, that players go where they're not supposed to go, and players that were supposed to be really good end up not being good, and vice versa. And no one ever seems to learn anything from that. So one thing before we start is we may say some things that are outside conventional wisdom, and we may be dead wrong. We may be right. Who knows? But I want people to start thinking outside the box on some of this stuff, because in my opinion, the drafting is more of an art than a science. And we see every year, like, again, we've brought this up before. Evan Neal was supposed to be a can't miss prospect, and look what happened. I don't think there's one way to approach the draft. And I don't think we should also say, well, the draft guides and the draft experts say this player is awesome, and the fact that you guys don't think he's awesome, you're wrong. I think we need to get outside of that, and people need to sort of, it's okay to say, you know what, I don't really like this guy, even though everybody likes him, and vice versa. So I'd like both John and Dave's reaction to that first, because I think we all fall victim to that when following the draft.
I mean, for me personally, I've always said I go with what I think. Like, I listen. Obviously, I'm not professionally scouting anybody, but I go through what I look through as much as I can, find the information that I can, look at things in the past, but I make my own opinion. So that's why I'm like, you might not agree with, that's fine, but don't just say things because you saw somebody else go, well, they said, and so I'm going to say, and so you're wrong. Because you know what? You have no idea. None of us knew who followed the draft that Tom Brady in the 6th round was going to be the GOAT. Nobody knew that, or he wouldn't have gone in the 6th round. At the same time, there's been guys at the top of the draft that if let's look at Mandrich when he was coming out. Everybody thought he was going to can't miss all world. This guy was amazing. The incredible bulk, as they called him. He was on the Sports Illustrated cover. What happened? Guy totally failed. He redid his career towards the end as a guard, but he failed from where he was. You just never know. And I brought up the other day, the 2018 draft. I said I had heard some things, rumors that you were going to see Baker Mayfield. And people were like, nobody's taking Baker Mayfield. What do you do? He went 1. You just don't know, and you don't know how well these guys are going to be. System, I feel, dictates success and where you went far more than just how high you were drafted. Some guys, it just has to be the right spot for them to develop that next step. And other guys, like you said, Evan Neal seemed like he was a can't miss, comes here and he can't do anything right. So just make your own opinion and be okay with the fact that any of us could be super right and all of us could be extremely wrong.
Yeah, so for me, I love playing devil's advocate. And whenever the groupthink, as Eric's calling it, is trending in a certain direction, I always try to take a step back and say, all right, well, what's the complete polar opposite of that perspective? And let me look into that. Because I think as like a scout in a war room, it's your responsibility to look at every potential possibility and outcome. So you don't know who's going to call you on day 1, day 2, whatever pick, and the options you're going to have. You can speculate all you want, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of unknowns throughout this process. So trying to look at, hey, well, what if we trade down? Hey, what if we do this? What if we do that? And as much as we might need this player or that player, and they could be a blue chip prospect or whatever, what are the cons with that profile that maybe we're not putting enough of an emphasis on? Which I don't like to look at the negatives of a player, but particularly when you're picking in the top 5, top 10, you've got to delineate between them in some way, shape, or form, and you kind of have to look at that. The funny thing is, I was kind of reflecting on this the other week, and me wanting to trade down so much also kind of stems from the fact that when I got into scouting, we were consistently a playoff team. We ended up going to all the Super Bowls. So we were picking later on in the draft. And later on in the draft, you get into the 20s, there's so many more options to discuss, right? Because you have no idea who's going to last, what position they're going to address, who's going to fall. So picking in the top 10, or in this case, the top 3, and there's like limited options to discuss, I just get so bored with that. Then I want to start to think of convoluted scenarios, even though they're extremely unlikely. It's not to say that they're impossible, but again, I just like to turn over every stone that I can to see, hey, how might that look? Or how could that transform the team by comparison to just being resigned to the fact that, okay, we're going to get, Travis Hunter, more likely Abdul Carter.
Right. So that sort of sets up my intro question to this. Feel free to disagree, but are we all operating under the assumption that Cam Ward's going number 1?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and do we all agree that the Giants might make one more phone call, including on draft night, to see that's available? Or do you think that's off the, not the Titans would be willing to trade, but do you think the Giants will make one more phone call?
No.
I think that ship is sailing. Yeah.
Okay. I think they still might make a phone call. I don't think they'll be able to pry it, but I think they might still make a phone call. It would not completely shock me that Cam Ward ends up being a Giant, but I don't think it's happening. I think they'll make one last push. I think the price will be too high, and I'm not sure. I think the Titans have sort of told everyone with their lack of activity and free agency at quarterback that they're drafting Ward. That's my impression. Is that where we're at?
I mean, I think it's obvious, but I think the reason why the Giants won't, but I think somebody else might, is because the Giants have already talked to them the amount has been somewhat established, and at this point, the Giants aren't going to give what it sounds like it would take to get from 3 to 1. Now, there might be somebody else who's a little further back that might have something else they're looking to offer to come up, so they might make that phone call. But for the Giants, I don't see any reason why at this point you would. You already know they want a lot. It's not like they're going to change their mind because all three of us just agreed the Titans are taking Ward.
Right.
So if we believe that, you've got to assume the Giants believe that as well, and we're not going to give away 3 number 1 picks just to move
Oh,
up
God,
and get the
no.
guy. So I think that ship sailed for them. Now somebody behind them with maybe another piece, I don't know, a San Francisco that has a quarterback maybe that they don't want to give $60 million to. Maybe those guys make a phone call with a package deal to try to move up. But for the Giants, I don't think it's happening.
Okay. And Dave, you anything on that? You just think Ward's going to Tennessee?
Yeah, I think consensus right now is saying that Ward goes number 1 and Hunter goes number 2. And I think Hunter going number 2 is because he's got no injury concern like Abdul Carter does. Abdul Carter just had to go back to Indianapolis, do a medical recheck at the combine with his foot. The foot is a scary situation. From what I understand, it's similar to what Ahmad Bradshaw went through, where he ended up with all the screws and pins in his foot later on in his career. So to like start your NFL experience with an injury like that when you rely on your foot is challenging and certainly risky for a team investing that high a draft capital in you. So I think that the safer play for Cleveland is to go with Travis Hunter, Heisman Trophy winner. They can't be upset with that, two-way player. So I assume that that's how it falls. And then Abdul Carter is the conversation at 3.
Wait, so you're saying you're hearing that Carter's foot is worse than advertised?
I wouldn't say that necessarily. What I've heard is that it's something that requires, screws and what have you. So I'm not a doctor. I don't have access to medical exams.
Okay.
I'm reading tea leaves just as much as the rest of us. But the fact that I had read something last week that he had to go back to Indianapolis to do a recheck, which is apparently standard protocol throughout the combine process. When something comes up at the combine, you got to go back and get rechecked by those same doctors. At least that's what I was reading was saying. So I don't know how valid it is or not. But
well, Rosenhaus came out, and again, it's his agent. Rosenhaus came out and said the foot was fine, which again, people are.
Of course, he's going to say that.
Right. But my reaction to that was all 32 teams are going to have access to that medical data. So even if Rosenhaus is lying, everyone's going to know pretty quickly if he's lying or not. And at least the NFL teams are going to know that. So,
but I think fine though it's a little bit of a semantics. It was he doesn't require surgery, which still means we're going to let it heal. And I think I don't want to speak for Dave, but I'm thinking the condition itself over a period of time at some point may lead to needing that to be done. Even if it heals now, once you get those things, they're not permanently fixed. So it is a little bit of a concern. I was more concerned about the shoulder because that came up out of nowhere. It was the foot that he wasn't going to work out. And then suddenly at his own pro day, it was the shoulder as well. And I'm like, wait, I thought it was the foot. Now you got 2 injuries. And for the Giants, they are a walking mass unit usually every year. It does scare me a little bit with that part.
We're not going to be doing a post-draft show, guys, where Abdul Carter is an Eagle, are we? I hope not.
So, all right, wait. I've got a scenario that I wanted to screw with you guys with.
Oh, nice.
And we can go down this road real quick since you bring that up, Eric. Perfect. So, assume the draft goes Ward, Hunter. You're sitting there with Abdul Carter at 3, right? You get a phone call from Howie Roseman. There's a lot going on this week where Abdul Carter's an Eagles fan. He's got Eagles bracelets on his wrist. He's at the Super Bowl thing. He's got his own custom hoodie, the whole bit, right? And we saw like the whole Saquon Bar. That perspective, will he play for the Giants if he's really an Eagles fan, blah, blah, like that's all speculation. You're never going to look, I want to assume he's enough of a pro that no matter where he gets drafted, great. You look at Joe Milton going to the Cowboys because he grew up a Cowboys fan. Like there is some of that, but I don't think that somebody like Abdul Carter, from a character perspective, would like hate playing on the Giants. But just for the sake of it, Eagles lost a bunch of defensive line talent through free agency. Howie Roseman's like, if I get Abdul Carter, I can win 3 more Super Bowls, and he is the missing link. So he calls you up. He offers you get 32, right? You get their 2nd round pick this year, their 3rd round pick this year. You get next year's 1st, next year's 2nd, and then 2027's 1st. So you swap 1st this year, you net 2 more 1sts, 2 2nds, and a 3rd. But then Abdul Carter's on the Eagles. You got to see him twice a year going forward, and you might help them. Also, assuming that they do like lowest potential, right? For the draft pick, they win the Super Bowl every year. I looked at the trade value chart because I know that everybody would be concerned about what the value would be. On the low side, it's like your pick number 3 this year is worth $2,200. The like massive picks that I'm alluding to, again, on the low side is like $2,400 and change. But you're adding 5 additional day 1 and day 2 picks over the course of the next 3 years. And then you've got 10 picks going into this draft where there's a consensus that day 2, you've got a lot of opportunity to get starters and fill depth. Would you even entertain that conversation?
Well, one of the reasons I think they can't is that they are already in a public relations nightmare with the Saquon thing.
Yep.
So I think on the surface, you could entertain that, but I don't think you could do that with the Eagles. I don't think you could do. I mean, the Giants have traded in the division.
Yeah, that's why it's.
What they did back in the day. That's how they got William Roberts, I believe, is they traded with the Redskins at the time,
Right? With Washington,
and they got that's how they got William Roberts. But I can't see the Giants trading with the Eagles on a massive deal like that.
But that's a far different thing because we moved from the 2nd round back into the 1st round with Washington. We didn't drop from the top.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying that they can.
But I like Dave's idea. I hate Philadelphia beyond belief. So I would counter that offer. Say keep one of your day 2 picks next year. I want Cam Jurgens as well. So you give me your center. You give me your center along with that, and then I'll consider it. That's the only way. But I hate Philadelphia so much that. But for me, I don't think there's any one player worth that much in any particular draft. Even Carter at 3. It's just the fact that it'd be Philadelphia though that bothers me the most.
Yeah, it's not realistic whatsoever. So everybody that's listening, this is more or less a joke exercise, but just to mess with these guys, I wanted to see if they would entertain it or not. Because then you would, in theory, have a lot more ammo this year to then move back into the 1st round if you wanted to move up or trade your 2nd, and then that pick from the Eagles at the end of the 1st round basically becomes your 2nd. It's the same spot anyway, but we don't need to harp on it. It's a crazy
I don't want to get in too much of the show into unrealistic areas because I want to stay in but I will say this before we move on, and Dave knows this because he's got me hooked on these. He's got these goddamn draft simulators. If you trade down 2 or 3 times on these, you will be amazed at what your draft looks like. If you pile up 2nd and 3rd round picks in this particular draft, I have traded down a couple of times from 3 in the 1st round, gotten a couple more 2nd round or 3rd round picks. And at the end, I'm like, I'll take that. I'm like, holy crap, that is a really good draft. Again, you're missing out on the elite blue collar talent. And I've seen it already on the website that people are saying, never pass on the difference maker. That's absurd. But when you can fill out the rest of your roster, especially on the trenches, it's an attractive. I don't think they're going to do it. But if the Giants, and I know how Dave feels like this, I want to ask John about this too.
Sure.
Then let's get realistic here. But if the Giants do what we don't think they're going to do, and they do trade down from 3, and maybe even do it again, would you be upset with that?
Personally, no. And I'll say this: the Giants had 2 really you could probably pick other drafts, but I'm going to pick two specific drafts, 86 and 89. They had a lot of picks in both those drafts. They were big time drafts. If you go back and look, the first round pick in both those drafts really wasn't that big of a deal.
Right.
Brian Williams ultimately because of injury, Eric Dorsey because he was a role player, but he wasn't a dominating guy. He's just a guy they threw out there, and when they really needed to, George Martin played still a lot.
And who did they get in the second round?
Their second round in 86, you're talking Eric Howard, you're talking Pepper Johnson, you're talking Greg Lasker, you're talking Mark Collins. That was
Mark Collins, Pepper Johnson. So compare that to the first round. That's what I'm trying to say. Sometimes, and remember, Michael Strahan was a second round pick. Justin Tuck was a third round pick. So all I'm saying is don't get hung up, because the counter argument I get pissed off people are using lately is like, well, look, we passed on Micah Parsons and then we ended up with Kadarius Toney. Well, the problem in that scenario is they blew the Kadarius Toney pick. They blew the DeAndre Baker pick. I mean, they made bad picks. It wasn't the fact that they traded down. It was they did shit with the picks that they were given.
Well, the problem with the Toney one in particular, one, he sucked, but it was also the following year with the extra picks we have, those guys didn't really dominate the way we kind of thought they were going to. Neal hasn't really done much, and Tibbs is, he's good, but I don't think he's been the difference maker a lot of people thought he might be.
And Dave?
Yeah,
you're a trade down guy.
I'm a huge trade down guy just because of where we're at as a franchise, and the depth that we need to continue to build up. And yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. If we hit on those picks instead of catastrophically missed on them, there'd be an entirely different narrative to this conversation. So I get that fans are frustrated, and do we feel like they're going to get it right this time, or do you want to just take the safe thing? I think most fans revert to let's just take the safe thing, which in theory could be Abdul Carter, right? Like, look, if Abdul Carter had perfect medicals, I don't think this is even a conversation. I think you have to take him, right? But the fact that the medicals are a concern when we have medical issues every single year on this team, the turf monster gets everybody, it's just scares the living shit out of me. So I would much rather trade down. It doesn't matter to me if it's a trade down in the top 10 and you still net a quality prospect, a trade down into 15, a trade down into the 20s, a trade all the way down to the last pick in the first round. Anything's on the table for the right price as far as I'm concerned, because you can manipulate it in so many various ways that would be beneficial to the long-term growth, development, and success of this organization.
So are we on board that even if Cleveland trades down, the team picking at 2 is likely to take Travis Hunter? Is that where we're all at right now? Could take Abdul Carter, but they're probably going to take Hunter.
I would assume so, particularly with all the noise that's been coming out about Shedeur dropping. And I never really looked at Shedeur as like a top 3 pick anyhow. So the only guy that doesn't have as much risk coming off the back of winning a Heisman Trophy and all that is Travis Hunter. So I would assume that, yeah, but I don't really see a trade up for Cleveland's pick. But then why would somebody trade up for Abdul Carter, whoever, at 3? So, it's just not a draft where you're screaming, man, I really need that guy. Because at 3, what you're trying to do is get ahead of the Patriots, right?
Right.
And whatever they're going to do.
Or the Giants. At 2, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And John, you thought someone might still trade up for a quarterback, or no?
Well, it kind of depends on what they're thinking. New Orleans, you brought up a point, and I know a lot of people kind of were like, oh, it doesn't. It does. New Orleans' need at quarterback suddenly changes a lot of things for a lot of people, not necessarily above New Orleans, but everybody below now knows, oh, crap. Now we might need to get above New Orleans if Shedeur is going to go. So you got San Francisco at 11. They might want, because they're not sold on 60 mil for Purdy, or it would have already been done. They might want to move up. They might want to jump ahead. There are other teams now that might jump. Pittsburgh it looks like, or sounds like, rumor is, that they're starting to wear very thin with their patience for Aaron Rodgers. Well, they're going to need a quarterback. You can't wait to 21 necessarily now that you could have two guys go. Dart could be gone before 21 rolls around, depending on what happens. So it's an interesting thing. I'm curious, Dave, I want to ask you real quick because I know we're going to focus on other stuff.
Yeah.
Let's just say Cleveland doesn't go Carter or Hunter. Both those guys are sitting there for the Giants. You have a preference? Do the medicals automatically make Hunter the better of the two choices?
Yeah, but I still don't like it, and I'd still rather trade down. Hunter.
Yep.
So my issue with Hunter is how much tread's left on the tires. Being a two-way player in college, he's got chicken legs, which scares the living daylights out of me. And how do you utilize him? You know, somebody made the point about Isaiah Simmons. Might have been you, Eric.
Yeah.
And you know, jack all trades, master of none type thing. You're going to use Hunter on both sides in theory, or if you don't, which side are you using him on? I can see a claim for using him in either spot for the Giants. I don't fight the argument that Hunter will be a splash impact player early on in his career, but I struggle with the longevity of him in the NFL, particularly with how much he was utilized and relied on in college. So again, when I'm allocating that high at draft capital to a player, there are just a lot of warts on him and Carter that make me concerned. If the Giants end up taking either one of them, I'm going to hope for the best, but in the back of my mind, I'm just going to be pretty concerned.
Well, the irony with this, and I've seen a number of pundits struggle with the same thing, not Giants pundits, but national pundits. They say they're struggling to predict what the Giants are going to do. They'll say, you know what? I could see them getting Abdul Carter, but they've got Burns and Thibodeau, so how do they use them? Aren't you giving up on Thibodeau at that point? These are the national pundits. I can see them going getting Hunter, but you've got Deonte Banks there. Now, all of us as Giants fans know, well, we could still upgrade at those positions.
Sure.
I don't think Thibodeau or Banks has shown enough to say, hey, they're safe. So, and we've talked about this before, but the irony is actually the need doesn't exactly match up either with the value that's going to be there as well, which kind of, again, lends to maybe if somebody calls, you look at that pick. But I'm operating under the assumption right now, and I think most people are, is Ward goes 1, and the Giants take whoever's left between Hunter and Carter. That's where I am right now, and I would be somewhat surprised if that's not the outcome on the 24th. Is that so? So we can move on. Is that where we're all at right now? Is it going to be Hunter or Carter most likely? And
yeah,
depending,
I think that's the realistic, logical, rational outcome of things here. I think so. I've tried to, even in my stance on the show as of late, I've tried to play devil's advocate with myself. Of okay, Dave. Well, get realistic. They need a quarterback. If they are going to go all in on quarterback at some point in this draft, how's that going to look? And when I was kind of dissecting it a bit, it's nobody's really been able to nail down what the Giants want to do with this current regime, right? Mm-hmm. There's smoke screens, what have you. They kind of like ship with some misdirection here and there. What if they put the entire contingency out there at Colorado's Pro Day as a smoke screen of sorts, and then you got Chris Mara going down to Ole Miss to look at Jackson Dart. And we know Chris Mara is the eyes and ears of John Mara. We know quarterback on day one is an owner decision. I think Jackson Dart is more the style of quarterback that they would want. My issue with Jackson Dart is that he had a tremendous defense playing at Ole Miss. I mean, you look at the prospects coming out of that organization in this year's draft on defense, and it's just through the roof. And if you look at the score discrepancies this past year in all those games, their defense held all their opponents to very low numbers, single digits in a lot of games, and then they beat the pants off of them in more cases than not. So how much of his film is skewed this past year because of how good their defense was and the fact that the Ole Miss offense was going up against tired defensive opponents on a regular basis, which kind of skews his metrics a little bit in his data. You know, Jackson Dart is more of the package of what I think they're looking for. If you really forced my hand on, like, we had to take a quarterback, you know, I like Will Howard a lot. Who I think they like more would be Tyler Shough. Tyler Shough, when you put on Tyler Shough's film, he's older, he's 26. 2 years ago, he had a broken leg. So again, damaged goods, which it's hard for me to invest in. But Paul Dottino's point when I had him on my show recently was they still need some sort of youth at quarterback, even if that individual ends up being a bridge backup for the next guy that you draft in a couple of years, but at least you hedge the vets that you have with some sort of youth. Tyler Shough, when you look at his film, is the closest to what they hope Daniel Jones could have been as a ceiling and what Aaron Rodgers is as a passer. So he's got the smoothest release. He is the traditional pocket passer. He can break away with his legs as he needs to. He's not a runner as much as a Jackson Dart is. But Shough is sort of the guy that if you wanted a bridge backup, if both the vets get hurt or something like that, or they both bomb, you can slide him in, hope that you hit on him. If not, you can draft somebody in a year or two. I don't think it prohibits you from doing that. So those are sort of like the options I see if they do really intend on taking a quarterback in this year's draft. But I don't think Shedeur or Milroe end up being the guys.
It's interesting because John Schmelk, if you've been watching his podcast, and he really knows his, I mean, the Giants content. He really knows his draft stuff, and he has excellent guests on every year. So I really recommend the Giants.com stuff with Schmelk when he's interviewing people. You can tell John really likes Shough, and in comparison with the other quarterbacks, and he's brought up a couple of interesting things that made me think too. Well, everyone knows, first of all, everyone knows the issue with Dart is the Lane Kiffin offense, simplistic, one read, and the Kiffin quarterbacks don't tend to do well in the NFL. And Cy has brought that up as well too. So that is a valid concern about is he mentally able to adapt to the NFL, because that kind of quarterback hasn't. But Schmelk has also brought out the fact that he thinks this whole thing with Shedeur with processing has been overrated, because he talks about the Colorado offense being fairly simplistic, and because Shedeur takes a lot of sacks, he isn't processing that quickly. What he and one of his recent guests came to the conclusion is Shedeur is very good at not being sloppy with the football. He doesn't force a lot of make bad decisions, bad throws. He doesn't throw interceptions, and that's a pro to his game. But listening to him and listening to his guests, they consistently don't see it with Shedeur. And the Dart stuff does concern them. And it's interesting. I think Schmelk's on board with you, Dave, that Shough, to him, even though he's older and has the injuries, he seems to like his play better than the other guys. So I wouldn't discount Shough. Not as a first round guy, but that's the problem, is where does he end up going? Right. Because can you wait and hope that he makes it to the top of the third round, which is, I think, about where it would be appropriate to take him. Do you have to trade back into the second? Is somebody going to like him a lot? Do people address, like, how many teams really need a quarterback in a class where it's like, are we like really in love with these guys? There's a lot of warts on all of them. So I don't think I'd want to take him at the top of the second. I think that's too aggressive.
But, he could end up going at the end of the first or something. Who knows, right? It's all speculation. You don't know how other teams are going to be in love with different prospects. But if he's there for us in the third, which I don't think, Milroe, Dart, Shedeur, I think all those guys go ahead of that in rounds 1 and 2. He's the kind of guy that I would lob up a Hail Mary on and just hope that at a minimum we've got a stable backup in the room, some youth in the room that we can transition, and then have somebody else that comes in a year, 2, 3 down the line, whenever that becomes appropriate to go after. And then if he goes earlier, then I'm looking at a guy like a Will Howard in round 4.
So and again, I want John to weigh in on this because John is
going in a different direction.
Interesting argument with Milroe, and
you're a big Milroe guy.
Yeah,
I know.
So I want John to weigh in on that in a second, but I just want to finish up with you real quick, Dave. So I don't know where Howard to me is tough. I don't know where to put Howard in this draft. I don't know. Again, when I do the simulator, when Howard sometimes is down in the mid rounds, and I don't know if he's going to last that really in the real world, but sometimes I think if he's sitting there in the mid rounds, maybe he's worth to take a shot at. But then again, it's the opportunity cost, because this is what I want to get into, because this is a really deep draft at some positions that can really help the Giants. Yep. So when I'm doing these simulations, Howard is there oftentimes in the mid rounds, but then I see, my God, there's another defensive tackle there that I really want, or there's a running back there that would really help the Giants. But Howard's there. What is your take on Howard, and John too? How do you guys feel about Howard? Because I don't know about him.
I like Howard. He was a transfer into Ohio State and won a national championship. He had that one bad game where he mismanaged the clock at the end with Oregon, and he got a bum rap for that. But the way that he persevered the rest of the season off the back of that adversity was very telling to me about who he is as a leader, who he is as a quarterback, as a person. A lot of guys that could rattle their mental, and it was the polar opposite for him. He learned the hard lesson in that moment and then won a national championship. I mean, I can't really ask for much more of a turnaround off the back of a catastrophic loss like that. So I really like Howard. I think that he can run better than most people think that he can run. He can throw the ball. Is he perfect? No, but for a 4th round pick, I mean, this goes back to my point of I would rather punt on quarterback. I'm not in love with any of these quarterbacks. They all have issues, so I don't want to go down that road. But if you're forcing my hand and saying you have to take a quarterback at some point in this draft, or this regime is going to do it one way or the other, whether you like it or not, Dave, they're going to do it. So figure out where you fit in the quarterback. Those are the guys that I think can make sense depending on how the boards fall. But I agree with you, Eric, that I'd much rather go with a different position in a lot of those contexts.
Okay, so I want to hear what John has to say about Milroe, which I've heard, but I want the audience to hear it too. But sure. And Howard, but so Dave, real quick. So I'm okay too if they don't take a quarterback in this draft. I was going to have a problem with that, but when I've run the simulations and I look at these quarterbacks more, I'm okay with them not drafting a quarterback this year. I don't expect them to do that, but I'm okay with it. So, anyway.
Well, particularly because they signed 2 veterans. If they'd only signed 1 veteran, it's a completely different story.
Okay. All right.
That's a good point. Yeah, actually, that's the point I made. Will Howard, he's okay. I like him. But I would say if you put in Shedeur Sanders on Ohio State, they still win the national championship. I think if you put Jalen Milroe on Ohio State, they still win the national championship. That's a part. So I don't really hold that as a whole lot of esteem. I think Riley Leonard and Will Howard are very similar, and I don't like that at all, period. Shuck scares me because of his age, number 1. 2, his injury history. 3, why are we bringing in a guy who basically he's going to sit for a year? You're not really going to play him for sure. Right. Now he's a year old, even older, so you don't really know. You're going to carry it into next year. Now you got his guy, he's like 27 years old. he doesn't bring a lot to the table. You're not, to me, you've wasted, as Eric said, I've wasted a pick in the middle portion of the round on a guy who's he could be a great quarterback. We don't know, but his ceiling in terms of what he could be athletically is much lower than some of the other guys. Jalen Milroe is a swing for the fences. His floor is much higher because I can use him for a bunch of other stuff. If I don't care if he's ultimately not the quarterback down the road per se. You got to remember, Daboll needs to win. I think Shane and Daboll are on different tracks, not necessarily mind tracks, but where they are in terms of the organization. I think Shane's deal with Mara is a little bit tighter than Daboll's is with everybody else. Daboll's got to win. And you can bring in a Milroe, and now I can do a Justin Fields kind of thing that Pittsburgh did with Wilson. I can bring that guy in. I could let him run some of those plays. I could easily, I could, if I want to, I could make Winston the emergency quarterback and only bring him back on if Wilson gets hurt. And I let Milroe be that guy that I use during the game. He's a tank. I can use him for other stuff. I think he's a swing for the fences. Now, my concern, though, is I think other people now are seeing that too, and that he might go higher than we thought. When he was dropping into the second, third, now you could easily make the case, I can take it. The bottom of the first, that means the Giants got to trade back in to get him, and I don't know how much I feel about that. But I do like him, and I like him way above the others. The Shedeur Sanders thing bothers me the most about him is because I think we talk about him so much because of his name. I think we take him apart because of his name, but I also think he's in the discussion only because of his name. Anybody else quarterbacking at Colorado bringing the same results without the Sanders name is probably being looked at as a second, third round guy, because you also had Heisman Trophy winner who played out at wide receiver and at defensive back.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's the Sanders name brings more attention to him. Dart is interesting, and I think you might be onto something, which now scares me, the fact that Chris Mara did go there. That's the part that's going to feed into some of our folks who just know that the Maras are into stuff. But I like Milroe. I think it's either going to be a home run as at quarterback, or at the very least, and I know people bash me when I say this, a very more athletic and very Taysom Hill, a guy that you could use for a number of years in the position that you could, kind of move them all around, provide something to your team while you're still looking. But the point you made at the very end about the veterans is something we talked about the other day, and I said the same thing. Once they signed two veterans of very equal status, it wasn't like the second guy was, bringing back a Drew Lock kind of situation. It was two guys that could be the starter. Once you went that route, you kind of knew where they were kind of looking. We're really more resigned to going after other positions, and that other quarterback is either down the road or he's a guy that fits the system that we have that we can utilize. But it's not. We're not banking on getting a guy to then push that first starter.
Well, two things. So something to really support your case, John, is I saw an interview with Ran Carthon, who used to be till very recently with the Titans, and the son of Maurice, the best blocking, Charles Way and Maurice Carthon, the best blocking tight ends the Giants have ever had. All right. So he scouted Milroe two ways. He said, I have two reports on him. And one of them was the Taysom Hill scouting report, and the other one was the quarterback. So he said, made the same argument that you just did. He was saying, at the very least, you have a Taysom Hill out of him, and then maybe he can develop into the other something else. But he was also making a big deal out of the runs, the running, that don't underestimate the ability of a quarterback to get out of trouble and make something out of nothing. And so he wasn't totally on board, but he was making the same argument that you were making with him on that. So I think we should consider that. Now, if you hate the idea of Milroe coming to the Giants, we kind of want him to go in the first round, because then it's going to push somebody else down to us. So I've got mixed views on this, because part of me is channeling John here and going, yeah, I'd like to see maybe Milroe on the Giants, and maybe he becomes the next Lamar Jackson. But then I think, well, that's not likely to happen. And if he does go before us, then one of those defensive tackles or an offensive lineman, a really good offensive lineman or a really good defensive tackle, is going to fall to us to 34. So I've got got mixed opinions on that. So But anyway, John, I want to just let you know that Rand agrees with you on that. So
I have a feeling that Milroe won't make it past 21 if the Steelers are still sitting at 21.
well, the NFL has invited him to the
There's a reason why they brought him on. It's not like all along he was expected to be there in the first round. The way things have been going, he's been the third, fourth, fifth quarterback, depending on which rankings you looked at. So it wasn't like a guarantee. The fact that they're now inviting him kind of late in the process, saying he'll be there, tells me that they have an idea. They don't like to bring quarterbacks there. It happens every now and then, but they don't want to bring them there just to watch them sit. That gets to be an ugly scenario for them. He's there for a reason.
Dave, one last thing on Milroe. So Alabama went through changes on the offense. Milroe coming into the season was expected to do better than he did. Do you sort of factor in the fact that it was a different offensive system for him this year, and he took a step back, that maybe there's still something there, and it was just the fact that things changed at Alabama, and that might be, or do you just think he doesn't have it?
My issue with Milroe is he's going to end up with an NFL organization that has a worse offensive line, worse skill players than he is accustomed to at Alabama. And that is going to egregiously highlight his flaws. When you look at his tape, a lot of his big plays are runs or his receivers are wide open. I mean, if it's a contested ball, the receiver goes up and makes the play for him, which you can't rely on with every NFL offense. So I just think that his game isn't going to translate into the NFL as much as people might hope that it will. It's not to say that he's not an incredible athlete, but Taysom Hill was a 7th rounder at a BYU that year. And I did like Taysom Hill that year. But if you're going to ultimately have to use a 2nd round pick or trade back into the first to get a guy that could end up being the value of a 7th rounder, there's too much not to like about. Could he excel, prove me completely wrong, and become the next Lamar Jackson? Sure, but again, when you talk about the other players that are going to be on the board at whatever pick you would have to allocate to Milroe, and we have 2 veteran quarterbacks already in the building, ahead of him on the depth chart, I don't see the point.
Well, if you trade up in front of the Steelers, you have to give up the pick number 65, the Giants' first 3rd round pick, plus like a 5th or a 6th round pick according to the chart. And then you're also losing quarterback. And then you're also losing the 34. So you're trading up from 34. So when I do it and I do those mocks, I've got my quarterback, but the rest of my draft doesn't look very good. So you get Abdul Carter, but if you trade on the quarterback,
if you traded down, that makes it far more of a possibility if you have multiple picks in the middle to take that swing to the fence. So,
well, that's the other thing I wanted to. I'm glad you brought that up, John. That's a really good point. If they're willing to sort of trade up into the first round to get the quarterback, and I know how Dave would feel about this, I would rather have them trade down in the first round twice, then get the quarterback, and then have the additional picks to fill out the rest of the roster. You're losing Hunter or Carter at that point, but then you're still building up your roster, and then you're okay if the quarterback flames out. So you're missing that premium pick. But I'm actually if I'm the GM on this team and I really want to get a quarterback in the first round, but it's not at 3, I'm trading down. I'm not trading up.
So I know we want to focus elsewhere besides just 3, but I do want to ask this question. If Carter magically goes at 2, are you guys, Dave, Eric, are you guys convinced the Giants will go Hunter, or does that actually become you think they will?
No,
I think the Giants love Hunter.
He's the one guy that I just can't get behind.
I think the Giants love Hunter, and I think the argument for Hunter is not just he is generational. I think they're using that word generational because he plays both sides of the ball. I think it's a little disingenuous. I don't think he's I don't think he's Deion Sanders at cornerback, and I don't think he's even. I mean, is even Malik Neighbors at wide receiver? I don't know. So. But if you take him, the bust factor, and I've already made this point before, is so much lower because if he flames out at one position, he's not likely to flame out at the other position. So say he's not a good wide receiver in the NFL, you still got a really good cornerback and vice versa. So he's this to me, he's a very safe pick. And again, unless you're in love with Darius Slayton, he's going to be a way better wide receiver than Darius Slayton. Unless you love Deonte Banks, he's going to be a way better corner than. So I take Hunter at that spot. Every time I do a mock, I play around with the trading down because I want to see what it looks like. But every time I do a mock, if Cleveland takes one of the guys, I take the other guy, and I think that's what's going to happen. That's me.
Yeah, no,
I love how cracked out you are on mock drafts.
Yeah, I love it. He hated it before. He hated him before. I couldn't even get him to do one. He hated him before.
Oh, I love it. I love it now. All right, so let's. John I'm sorry.
The thing. No, I was just gonna say real quick. The thing that I worry about with Hunter is this, and you kind of made the point on the one side of the coin. Here's the other side of that coin. You draft that guy with that mindset. Oh, we've got a really good corner who can also play receiver, but if he flames out a corner, we've got the receiver. And let's say you then do the rest of your draft with that in your mind. I don't necessarily have to get another receiver because we could just move Hunter over. He can play a little bit there. And we don't need another corner. We got to. And if that guy gets nicked up, I changed my entire draft process because I thought, oh, he's covering two things. That worries me a little bit. He's not. You just said. He's not Dion out there in terms of ability. He's not Rod Woodson. He's thinner. He's fine height wise, but he's a little thinner. I worry about. By the way, why don't we ever bring up level of competition for him? They're not playing in the SEC.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things there that worry me just a bit. Could he be a superstar? Of course he could. But I've seen a lot of corners, a lot of defensive backs in the top 10 to 15 completely fail out. And you just never know. And I know he's two positions, but I'm worried that the Giants are actually, if they go that route, are thinking that. We got two positions covered. Don't change the rest of your draft because of that. You continue with the mindset that you may not have one at either spot and draft whoever's best that's coming up. So they worry me. The thought process that they put into things.
Well, the one thing I will say in Hunter's defense, too, is his ball skills are off the charts, even as a wide receiver.
True. I'll give you that.
Catches he makes when the contested catches are insane. And it's not just like a one-off thing. It's like, oh my God, how did he come down with that ball? I mean, so there's a lot to like with Hunter. So if I am expecting them if Hunter goes to them, part of this to me again is, and John, you're 100% correct. When I again do the mocks, because he's a corner and a wide receiver, it very much affects what I do with my other picks. Because if there's a really good corner there, I go, I've got my corner already. And then if there's a really good wide receiver there, I'm like, do I really want to spend another pick at a wide receiver when there's another lineman there? So it's the same thing with tiers. You're usually presented with an option of, do I want, they're all in the same tier, but where's the greater position of need at that point? And that's really how the Giants and other teams operate. They all admit that. There is no such thing as best player available. What they do is they rank the guys in tiers and then need factors into the tier. And the Giants have admitted this. I mean, multiple GMs have admitted this, that, when push comes to shove, if the same group of players are in the same tier, need will then become and that makes sense, especially in this day and age when free agents come and go like crazy, and you are kind of trying to plug holes. So you're 100% right, John. If you take Hunter, it will, I think, and Dave may feel differently, I think it very much affects what you do the rest of the draft.
Yeah, I mean, we can continue talking about the first round pick, but I feel like we got so much more to. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me set this up then. All right. So tell me if I'm off base here. Well, offensive line to me looks like it's not very deep at offensive tackle. There are some offensive tackles, but it kind of, if after you get after the second round and maybe the third, it kind of drops off. There are a lot of interesting guards, tackle comp types. So they might be able to play tackle, but if they can't play tackle, you can plug him in at guard, which is actually a really good fit for the Giants because the Giants have that kind of offensive line right now. They could move Illuminor inside, or they can keep him out of tackle, and vice versa. That kind of thing. So to me, it looks to me that there are more guard types, but at the same time, once you get out of the third round, again with the offensive line, it doesn't look like the options don't look as good to me. Defensive tackles, it keeps going. So often what I've been strategizing with, if there's a really good offensive lineman there at 34, I tend to go with him or the defensive tackle if the offensive lineman isn't there. But I can still get those good defensive tackles in round 3 and round 4, and even beyond in some cases. So both of you, I'm curious, are you guys leaning, if you were going to choose between offensive linemen or defensive linemen at 34, which way are you leaning if there's a guy there? And Dave,
so first off, I think offensive line is deeper in this class than most people are leading on.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah. I agree with you that tackle, it kind of falls off a little bit once you get through like the Connerly, Simmons, Ursery folks. But then you get into like the Beltons, the Ozzie Trapillos, the Wyatt Milliams, the Connor Williams. I really like this kid Logan Brown out of Kansas. Yep. Jack Nelson's an interesting one out of Wisconsin, but offensive tackle is definitely different by comparison to the interior offensive line, where they have less depth. So I think that I wouldn't go either way with the second round pick, because there is so much depth at both of those positions, whereas some other needs that you might have potentially aren't as deep, like cornerback or something along those lines. If they don't get Travis Hunter, but they still identify cornerback as a glaring need, there are going to be a lot of interesting names at the top of the second round at the cornerback position that I think could be incredibly valuable and make a splash impact earlier on. You could see somebody like a Jahad Campbell from Alabama somehow fall there. Inside linebacker is one that continues to just plummet down the draft every year. I don't for the life of me understand it when they play such a pivotal role, but he's got a shoulder injury. I think that he should go in that 15 to 20 range on the backside of things, but I wouldn't be shocked if he slid there. And then
who are you talking about?
Jahad Campbell.
Alabama.
Yeah. So, I mean, the fact that offensive and defensive line are deeper in this draft, granted, there's definitely going to be somebody incredible there that you could take a swing on. But when I look at it and trying to figure out needs with value of position depth overall in the class, and you do all the simulators, if I go offensive, defensive line earlier on day 2, later in day 3, there's still a ton of that talent that, I'm looking at. And then when I'm looking at trying to fill other positions that could potentially be of need, maybe not as immediately, but in a year or two, it makes more sense to me to go with those positions over the trenches. I'd rather load up on the trenches 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round, what have you. Well, we don't have a 6th round, but you know what I mean.
Well, that's interesting, Dave, because I thought, I know you're a trenches guy, so I was sure you were going to say But
yeah, I mean, it's just the quality of depth, man. Because, like, all right, so if you say that the guy you're gonna, and unless like a Walter Nolan falls in your lap or something like absolutely incredible like that, sure, but the caliber of guy that you're gonna get at the top of the second, is it really that far superior than the guy you're gonna get at the top of the third? Like, are you that convinced that they are going to be light years ahead of who
Good
you would
point.
get in the third round. Like,
That's a good
I don't
point.
see that, so that's where it's like, I'd rather kick that can a little bit later. And then even if the guy who's there at the top of the third or the back of the third isn't exactly what I want, then it might not go perfect, but then I can just take 2 guys on day 3, or 3 guys on day 3 at a given position. And then I'll hit on one of those in theory. I mean, maybe not the Giants with the way they've been drafting in recent memory, but like, you're hedging your bet a little bit more. So if you're like forcing me to answer your question,
Yeah.
I think defensive line is more of an immediate need by comparison to offensive line, but I would rather wait and address a different position, more like cornerback.
I like your answer. And John, what I mean,
Yeah, so I think a lot dictates what they did at 3. So for fun, let's say they got Abdul Carter. Well, where's Abdul Carter going to play? He could start right immediately, but that means you're moving Tibbs back. So could he play inside? Maybe you bring him in to play inside a little bit. You can move him around. I can't see them going inside linebacker in the second round. Even if it's higher up, I just don't see them doing it. But positional pieces will dictate too. If there's a huge run on the defensive tackles, that could easily move some of the offensive linemen down to other teams, which means some of the other positions, and one that we don't talk about really that much at all, especially if we don't go Hunter at 3, is wide receiver. There are a few wide receivers that were pegged to be mid first round guys.
yeah.
A Burden could go. Is it Emma? How do you say his last name for Ohio State? He could drop down. Then you're looking at A.O. Manor, maybe from Stanford, could be sitting there. A guy who gives you size, which we don't have. We have some guys that we brought in with bigger size. They haven't had a lot of production though. You're kind of hoping they'll do something. So you get a really young guy with some size in there. You could bring him in. There are some other ways you could go. Then you talk about, though, if the defensive tackles don't have a run, or even if they did have a run, let's say they did, but the Giants know that's one of our biggest needs. We got to get a younger guy. They signed some vets. The Giants did the same thing with the offensive line, and I kind of thought they might bring back Van Roten, and they did. And to me, that signaled that they were going to be like, okay, we try to keep a solid vet group together because we can't guarantee we're going to get another young inside guy. We'll develop some of the other ones, and hopefully we're going to move Neal and see what happens, all that good stuff. But if one of those defensive tackles that you might think are like later second round, but all of them are gone, and now that guy is still sitting there, maybe you start looking at him. The guy from I think it's Williams from Ohio State. You want to look at Alexander. To me, I don't know. I'm not as big of a fan, but he could be sitting there. Harmon out of Ohio or out of Oregon. Is he more Tarzan plays like Jane? He had the one good year, but I don't know how much. I hate those guys who had the 1 year. Then you never know. But JPP had 1 year. Stuff happens. So I think it's whichever position really has a run that the Giants have a need at might dictate what they do at second. But I would say, minus the fact that I want Jalen Milroe and I'm willing to spend a second round pick to get him, let's take that off the table. I would keep an eye on running backs and see which ones might be sitting there, especially if some of the really top tier guys fall through the first round. I mean, Gentry's going to be gone. But beyond that, some of those other guys might be sitting there at the top of 2, and they might be too good of a value for the Giants to pass.
I'm going to say something that's going to support what the point Dave made too. So again, I know I'm harping on these simulators, but I will find that when I get down in the lower rounds, there are still defensive. I may have taken 2 defensive tackles already, and then I can't justify taking 3 defensive tackles, not because it's a numbers game at that point in the depth chart. But to support what Dave's saying, there are going to be really decent defensive tackles available, and maybe as late as round 5 and 6 in this draft.
Oh, sure.
So I'm actually leaning towards double dipping anyways. So I want to come out of this draft because I think the supply is there. I think there's a lot of good guys, and I think you can get now. And let's talk names here too. I think you can get a guy that is a good run defender, and then you can also then get a guy who's a good pass rusher. So I think you can double dip at both. And I saw Brett Coleman do a podcast about 2 weeks ago, not a podcast, a YouTube video about 2 weeks ago on his underrated prospects. And I'm starting to hear this name come up more and more as somebody who's going to go higher than people have pegged him, is that Norman Lott from Tennessee, because he's not a great run defender, but he is one of the top, if not the top, pass rushing defensive tackles in this game in terms of a win rate. So even the guys that they're talking about in the first round, like the Nolans and so forth, this guy, they're saying, don't be surprised if he even goes late first, early second. And, you know, a lot of people had him as a third or fourth rounder. So I think even in the defensive tackle class, because there's a lot of really good run defending defensive tackles, and those guys tend to slide. So you might actually want to get your pass rushing defensive tackle early and then get your run guy later. But there, I mean, Dave and John, I'm looking at this list, and it's like name after. I'm looking at my list now, but so again, everyone's got Mason Graham, obviously number one, and the same names always come up early: the Walter Nolans, the Ken Grants, the Derek Harmons. I'm a big fan of Tyleik Williams because I like big run defending guys, and I do think he's going to be a little bit of a better pass rusher in the pro level. Not a quick penetrator, but a bull rush type of guy. Part of my philosophy here is like, say we get Abdul Carter and we have Brian Burns and we have Kayvon Thibodeau, you've got your pass rush. I want to stop getting run on. So part of me says get two massive defensive tackles in the middle that do offer pass rush. Dexter Carter can rush a passer, and I think you can get, even with some of these run guys, you can get a little bit of a bull rush, but stop the run and then let your outside guys get to the quarterback, and that's what they're paid to do. But you've got guys, again, TJ Sanders, you've got Alfred Collins,
who was in for a visit.
Yeah, who was in for a visit, which is very interesting. But actually, the guys that were all in for the visit, if that was the Giants' first day draft, I would have been thrilled because they had Donovan Jackson come in that day. They had Collins that day. They had Abdul Carter, and they had Scadaboo, the running back. And I know that I know Dave's got strong opinions on the running backs. So I want to get there, but are there guys, Dave, and I want to hear it from you, John. Again, I keep going down this list. I think, for instance, where's the guy that I really like too? I mean, Ty Robinson's out there. Is going to
Ty Robinson's my guy later in the draft.
Ty Robinson. I mean, is there?
Yeah.
I think there are guys that even like that are going to go in the fifth round here. Like even like in Texas, Vernon. I mean, this was one of the mock picks that Mad Plaid made, and is. I mean, like even Vernon Broughton. If you want to bring in. So I don't. So I mean, so Dave, starting off with you, who are your favorite? 3 or 5 defensive tackles? You could probably name 10, but are there guys that you're like, I don't care what round they go in, I want them to be a New York Giant? That's the guy I want on my team.
So a couple things on this wide-ranging topic. I think that defensive tackle has a lot more depth on day 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you names. You just listed off a bunch of guys. I like a good handful of them. Too. Yeah, I know. Yeah, right. No, same. But I think at the top of the second, defensive end is going to be the superior optionality by comparison to defensive tackle. You're going to see names like Landon Jackson, James Pierce, Jack Sawyer, Tui Malau, Nick Scorton. Those are all guys that I think are viable options at the top of the second. I really like Tui Malau out of Ohio State. Fantastic pass rusher, showed up, when it counted the most. And, you could say, well, if we take Abdul Carter, well, is Abdul Carter an outside linebacker or is he a defensive end? Like, how are you going to utilize him? I think we know that we need more pass rush in this team one way or the other, but I could see that being more of an area of value by comparison to defensive tackle at the top of the second round. Because if I go into the day 3 guys at defensive tackle, you got 2 guys out of Georgia, Stackhouse and Ingram Dawkins, who are fantastic. You got Tonka Hemingway, you got Elijah Roberts out of SMU. And then if you really want to get deep in like the 6th, 7th round guys, Cam Horsley out of Boston College, like Cam Horsley a lot. I am trepidatious around North Carolina players because they have not been working out for us as of late, but Javari Ritzy, who's a defensive tackle out of UNC, like him a ton, good pass rush prowess. Nash Hutchmaker out of Nebraska, Riley Mills out of Notre Dame, Tim Smith out of Alabama. So trying to give you more names of people that I like deeper, where I think there is a lot of value that if you want to allocate your 2 7th-round picks on a couple defensive tackles, particularly when you've allocated some free agency signings over there, could make sense. I'm a huge Ty Robinson guy. Love Ty Robinson. Yeah. TJ Sanders makes a ton of sense, like some of the names you outlined. But I think if I'm looking at defensive tackle and defensive end, there's a lot more value on day 2 defensive end wise, and it starts to fall off a little bit more. You can look at the Oladejus out of UCLA and the Umemelians out of Ole Miss and Tyler Barron out of Miami. Ethan Downs is a guy when you start to get like later on out of Oklahoma. You got Jared Ivey out of Ole Miss. I mean, that Ole Miss defensive line is just astronomical. And then if you want like some real late defensive end names, Fatal Diggs out of Syracuse is one that I think people are overlooking. Tyler Beatty out of Brigham Young, Anton Jukaj out of Arkansas, and JJ Weaver out of Kentucky. All guys. Savion Jones would probably fall into that category somewhere as well, out of LSU. But I think that defensive line is super deep, So, wow, Kyron Lacey found dead. That's a wild development live here on the show.
Is just on is he the wide receiver that during the LSU game did the gun? Boy, that doesn't.
He was the one. Well. Yeah. So not a total shock, unfortunate, obviously, but
I don't mean to drop that news on there. But yes, well, it was there, and I shared it. But Dave, I want to ask you though.
Yep.
I'm with you on the defensive end, minus this one fact. Bowen doesn't seem to, the Giants in general, since they brought Wink in, we don't really play traditional defensive ends, period. Burns and Tibbs are essentially edge for us is the end. We play Lawrence, and then you play another defense. So all of our defensive linemen now seem to be tackles. We don't really get even the standard, 5 technique guys that you could play in a standard 3-4. So it's really defensive tackles we just get, and then we get the guys playing edge. So if we get Carter, that's another edge. These defensive ends, I would like if we went to more of a traditional, or if they even kind of switched to more of a Tennessee defensive line that the Bowen, when he was there, that's what they played. They had strong 2 defensive tackles, but they played standard ends in a way. The Giants don't seem to do that. In fact, the biggest problem I have, and I think Eric would agree too, the fact our run defense is so weird is we rely on Lawrence in the middle, then we play a lot of light on the outside. We're very light elsewhere, and you're just sacrificing the run. So those defensive ends, how do they fit in the scheme that we're currently playing?
So they might not. Some of them do. But I think when you're looking at the defensive coordinator, right, Mara had some choice words about Bowen.
Well done.
And, is he really going to be with this franchise for his foreseeable future? And then at what point does Joe Shane need to say, hey, I might need to get some pieces in here for the next guy down the road if this doesn't work out? Maybe we convert back to a 4-3 because the 3-4 thing hasn't been working out for us. I mean, I think caliber of talent doesn't necessarily denote if they are not fit into a system, doesn't necessarily denote, particularly when there's a lot of uncertainty around that system going forward, bypassing on a talent. I mean, you could take a guy like Tui Malau at the top of the second, and I could play him at 3 tech defensive tackle. It's not like he's a small guy by any means, right? So,
what you're going to do with Golston, which they're going to do with Golston too. So it shows you they're willing to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, you can find a way to get them on the field at the end of the day. And if they're going to make an impact, I think that it's valuable. And then you have some more optionality and flexibility down the road if you do end up moving on from Bowen. I mean, I hope for the sake of stability in the franchise that Bowen's defense in the second year becomes incredible and they hit the ground running. And then, but are you going to be upset? Like, I used to love the NASCAR packages that we used to do with Spags, and why not change things up and be able to drop, like a few defensive ends in a certain, like, you put Dex in at nose tackle, and then you put 3 or 4 defensive ends around him as just like a random blitz package on a third down, and see if an offensive line can handle it. At least it shakes things up a little bit. So is it a perfect fit? No, but again, like, that's when you get into sort of like the whole BPA need conversation, and like what makes the most sense and all that. I just think that, barring Walter Nolan falling in your lap at the top of the second somehow, the caliber of talent at defensive end might be a little bit stronger early in the second.
Real quick, any fears of Pierce and the supposed red flags?
Yeah, I wouldn't take Pierce.
Okay.
But, like, it doesn't mean that he's not an incredible individual when it comes to like his physical abilities and what he could do on the field. But yeah, like Mike Green, Pierce, like I don't want either of those guys.
Pierce, again, not taking the character stuff aside, man, you could see the talent.
He knows how to play football.
He is something. Yeah. He is something. And I'm like, so what I tend to do is, again, I'm reading. I don't do what you do, and I think most people on BBI know this. I compile the draft guides, draft reports. I watch a lot of commentary, and then I'll watch clips. I'm not watching college game after college game after college game. So I'm not you. I'm not Cy. So, but a lot of times I say, well, I've got to watch this guy, so I'll watch clips. And he's one of those guys. I'm like, if the character is such a problem, I got to see the talent. And I watched him, and I'm like, God damn, that guy, if his head's screwed on right, that guy's going to be a heck of a player. He just looks like an NFL pass rusher.
As a sidebar, I don't watch college football.
Okay.
I don't. It's like, I look at prospects as, I want to see your full resume. I feel like far too often scouts fall in love with prospects earlier on in their career, and then they just can't let it go. And that's a huge issue to me. If I was going to come up with a ranking, it would probably be the week of the draft that I would put a board together, because I think you get too stuck on, all right, we come up with a ranking after the combine or something like that, and then it's difficult to adjust that on the fly, but you learn so much more.
Right.
Teams feel like they've made up their mind, and they know, like, all right, this is the guy that slots in here versus there, and we can't let all the media rumblings impact how we're going to decipher things going forward. But I don't watch college football. I don't enjoy watching college football. So I am also more of like, watch the highlight tapes, situational stuff. I want to look at the full resume. How'd you progress throughout your collegiate career? How'd your stats go? What were your game logs like? And who are you as a full resume versus sort of like, where you were at the start of the college football. I mean, you look at that, then Tet McMillan was the top guy on everybody's board going into like the start of the year,
Right.
And then now he's completely fallen off and could end up going in the 20s. And there's questions around, does he actually love the game of football and all this kind of stuff? Some video surfaced from like his early years at Arizona, where he basically insinuated that he doesn't love football, and that's dropping him a bit. I just don't get stuck on rankings. I like looking at the full resume at the end and then seeing what they're good at and how I can exploit it in a system.
Two things. One, to support what you just said, I saw some NFL insider, and I apologize for not remembering the name, say this draft falls off very quickly. And again, it stinks. It's like there's not a lot of, it's not top heavy. It's top heavy, and there's a couple picks. There are a few picks, but they were saying, and a number of people have said this, between picks 20 and 60, there's not a lot of difference. And they said character is going to be a defining element in deciding who these teams take because the rankings are going to be so close. And the argument was by this insider was, we're going to see people that are going to drop that you didn't expect to drop, and you're going to see people go higher that you didn't. And that's true every year, but they were saying this is going to be especially true this year because when push comes to shove, teams are going to start picking players when they're equal. They're going to go with the safer character guys in this draft. So,
well, particularly the Giants.
Yeah.
I mean,
Always,
we know
yes,
that,
yeah.
like that's how they lean regardless. So,
yeah, but we ended up with Kadarius Toney and DeAndre Baker too.
Yeah,
so who knows what's going?
Valid point.
But I do want to. Dave. There's something you said that I think might have been lost that I want everyone to hear. Is because of the supply of defensive linemen, and because you see the supply of particularly inside offensive linemen being deeper, that the Giants may go at 34 with a position that people, the average fan, is not going to think that they would normally go with. So we could see a corner. We could see a wide receiver. We could see
you look at it last year, nobody thought we were going to take a safety at the top of the second.
Right.
Right.
And you and I didn't. And you and I did not. Yeah.
No, I know. I asked every guest I had on my show last year, what's the one position we're going to avoid taking this year? Everybody said safety.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody. And then we take Tyler Newman at the top of the second. So, yeah, again, trying to get a read on what you anticipate the Giants are going to do is totally speculation. And, yeah, I mean, corner is one. I could wide receiver.
I already said edge. So you could see edge. But if they take, especially if they get Hunter, if they draft Hunter, edge is in play, especially at 34, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Even if they take Carter, I don't see why you wouldn't. I mean, it's crazy, but dude, when's the last time that an opposing offensive line or quarterback saw the Giants on their schedule and was like, oh shit, like I'm going to get my ass beat that game? You know, wouldn't it be nice if coming into next year, you kind of have the wake up call of like, wow, we've got to stop Abdul Carter. We've got to stop, name another defensive.
I'm going to name you a guy. I'm going to name you a guy that I'm torn on. Jack Sawyer. Would you?
I like Jack Sawyer quite a bit. He's one that I could see going in the first round. Most people have him somewhere in the second. Some have him dropping all the way to the third. And I think he could fall anywhere in there. Top of the second might be a little aggressive for him based off of like how everything's going to shake out. But if you trade down in the second, because that's a hot area for people to want to trade up into, you take him in the mid-second after some of those other defensive end names go, I wouldn't be mad at it at all. I think Jack Sawyer, character-wise, is exactly the kind of guy you want in your locker room. Like, he is a Giants player overall. Big impact when it matters. Gritty guy, loves the game of football. I mean, that is one of my biggest things with prospects is how much do you love football? And you see it with a guy like Evan Neal where it goes the opposite way, and how much of a detriment that is to your position group, to your offense, what have you. So I like Jack Sawyer as a person, as a football player, with his skills and traits and all that kind of stuff. He checks a lot of boxes for me. I was much higher on Jack Sawyer going into the process, and everybody has been talking a lot of shit about Jack Sawyer, and he's just been falling in every board that I've seen. But I like him a lot. I'd be thrilled to have him on the Giants.
I got a question for John too, but just a quick follow-up on Jack. The reason I said brought Jack Sawyer is I like him, but I see him all over the place. People either love him or they say no one dislikes him, but it's question how high does he go? Some people have him much higher than others, and I wanted to get your view on that. John, would you be shocked if they go corner at two? If they don't get Hunter, would you be shocked if they went Hunter at 34? Corner.
No, because you've got like a Trey Amos could be sitting there. You depending on who might fall. There's going to was it Barron from Texas? Could be sitting.
Barron.
Could be sitting there. It all depends on other positions. So if there's corner, we have a clear need. You cannot count on Banks. I mean, that's the whole point of why you go and get Paulson Adebo. It isn't so you can have a second corner. That guy is really our number one. Banks, you're hoping can be the second guy, but you don't know. He did the 1 year where you thought, oh, he could develop, and then he has just completely fallen off. He doesn't look like a guy who can play the ball in the air. He gets really handsy whenever if he panics, he just grabs the guy. He also forgets sometimes when the guy has the ball and he's running towards you that it's actually tackle football and you have to play. He seemed to have left his heart in the locker room. So I don't know if you can count on that. I think you have to get another corner because, Flott is Flott. He is what he is. I like Flott, but he's a skinny dude. And I don't know
Right.
he's ever going to be more than that. And I don't know you can count on him for more than maybe if he's playing regularly, you might only be able to count on him for 11 games. He's going to get nicked up constantly. And then again, he's not a physical presence. So yeah, I could easily see us going corner. The Jack Sawyer thing, I like him. I see him as like an Aaron Smith. The problem is we don't play a traditional 3-4. We don't play a traditional 4-3. We're still trying to figure out what the hell we actually are.
Right.
I could see him going to a Cincinnati, a Pittsburgh, a San Francisco, and that guy be a really rock solid guy on their D line. For us, I just think you'd bring him in, and I don't know they would know what to do with him until proven otherwise with Bowen, which I'm really hoping he will. I kind of feel like he'd be mismatched for our defense currently, but I like him a lot. I think he's a very solid player that you could count on week after week. Will be rock solid out there. He'll bring a calming presence, a physical presence, and a leadership presence to that team, and that gets undervalued a lot.
And who is that you're talking about again?
Sawyer, Sawyer from Ohio State.
Sawyer, yeah. So Dave, the question I have for you again. So people in chat who are listening, I can hear it right now. Why the hell are you guys talking about cornerback and edge guys in the second round? That's crazy. What all we're saying is if you look at the value of the supply of people that are going to be in this draft and where people are going to go, you've got to make business decisions early because the supply is going to run out at certain positions. So if you can get those defensive tackles and offensive linemen later, you might want to get these other positions addressed earlier. So don't, like last year, like Dave mentioned, safety. Very few people, if anyone, had us taking a safety last year in round 2. Don't be shocked if something happens. I can hear it now. If we took a corner, BBI is going to go crazy. They're going to be like, why are we drafting another corner? So Dave, I think you're a big fan of Barron, and I don't think he's making it to 2. I mean, the 34, right?
No, he's not. Barron, no shot.
There's no shot. He may actually go.
He can go top 10.
Yeah. He may go. So one of the guys I'm struggling with because of the injury is Siobhan Ravel, and he's got all the talent in the world, but that ACL and the level of competition scares me. But I'm going to throw that name out there. Another guy coming off an injury to Notre Dame corner,
Benjamin Morrison.
Is there a guy at 34, like one of those two or others, that you think might be there that, again, you personally, Dave, would be like, at 34, I don't have a problem with this guy. I would take a shot.
So,
or trade down in the second round.
Trey Amos is the name that I think would be the most popular there. I really like Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame. But you put on his tape and he is sensational. We don't have access to the medical checks, so I don't know how all that looks.
And it's a hip with him, right? It's a hip with Morrison. I think it's a hip.
Yeah, something like that.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
But Siobhan Ravel is more of like a Hail Mary type of played at ECU, go Pirates, but I can't pull the trigger. I can't pull the trigger on him because of if I wanted somebody more in that mold of a tall, athletic corner. A lot of talk about the Iowa State wide receivers, but let's talk about Darian Porter, the cornerback coming out of there, 6'3", blew up the combine. Would I take him at the top of the second? Probably not. Could you be convinced that he's that good? Yeah. Would I be pissed at it? Not necessarily. The one name that we haven't discussed is Azare Thomas out of Florida State. I think he's a guy that was talked about widely for a bit, and then it's gone kind of quiet on him for whatever reason. Another big body guy, 6'2". So I wouldn't mind adding. I mean, Darian Porter 6'3". One of those guys, Shaban Ravel, also 6'2". But Trey Amos is 6'1". Benjamin Morris like 6 foot. I could see any of those guys being viable options. It just depends on how they kind of have them stacked ranked. But when you're looking at those guys, are they going to be as good as whoever falls in from the first round? Probably not. I think corner's sweet spot is sort of the top of the third round if you get one of those like leftover guys that kind of fall to you. Because I just don't really see. There's like the Maxwell Harrison out of Kentucky that we haven't talked about, but smaller guy. I mean, they took Drew Phillips out of the program last year, so reuniting those two guys could be interesting. But I think he's not necessarily like an outside corner, which is what you're looking for on the depth chart here. So, is corner perfect? No. I think in all likelihood, the Trey Amos type would be like the safest bet out of all of them. But I do really like the Benjamin Morrison, Azariah Thomas, Darian Porter type, particularly if you like trade back a little bit in the second.
Yeah, I like Morrison. So for both of you, starting with John. All right, here's the question. So second round comes up, pick 34. Is there a wide receiver that you can't pass on that you think might be there that you say, you know what? I know we need D-line. I know we need offensive line. We know we need running back. But is there a wide receiver? And I think wide receiver – now, Cy thinks wide receivers need number 3 on this team.
Right.
And the argument can be made on that. Again, how strongly do you feel about Wan'Dale Robinson? We know the Hyatt so far hasn't and might not work out for them. Slayton is Slayton. We'll have to see how all of these guys respond to better quarterbacking. But is there a wide receiver? Because there seems to be – this is an interesting wide receiver class. I'm having a hard time stacking them because there's a flavor for every team there. There's a lot of interesting slot guys. But some of those slot guys might be able to play outside, and some of them can't. There are some big slot guys in this draft, and there's some very tiny, almost Wan'Dale-like slot guys. And then there are some bigger wide receivers out there that you wonder, do they have the athleticism at the NFL level? But I've heard a lot of people talk lately that this wide receiver class is being underrated. It's not last year's, but it's not as bad as some people are thinking. So is there a guy in the second or third round that you could see the Giants maybe taking a peek at? Now, John, I'd start with you. Is there somebody favorite that you like? You go, man, I'd really like to see him on this team.
It's kind of hard to say because it depends on those other positions per se. With Wilson and Winston, you kind of threw off what you had a little bit already with your receiving core. You already mentioned it. So now Wan'Dale, I don't know that Wan'Dale's going to get exploited the way you might have with a different kind of quarterback. We now have a quarterback who really excels more at putting the ball further down the field.
Right.
Two very different ways, but yes, both going down the field. I would like a difference maker in size because I feel like that's what we don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of depends on some of those other Manor maybe, but I don't know if he has the athletic ability that I would say you just put him on there. And that guy, because he just brings something different, because you got Neighbors on one side.
Right.
Slayton's not a small guy. He's a 6 foot wide receiver, decent bulk. He's got some speed down the field, but obviously his hands are somewhat suspect, and I was surprised they re-signed him, but we got him. Hyatt's the guy that I think is on his way out. He hasn't done anything. This is his last chance to prove it. So what do you get? Do you get a guy? Do we go for a possession guy? But that doesn't seem like it kind of fits. If we're going to do that, I'd rather look to tight end. Then I'd rather get me another tight end to add to go with Johnson. So, no, there isn't really one that I would say you have to have him. If a burden fell, maybe you consider that and you go, that guy could be a jack of all trades kind of deal. But I don't know that we have the offense to exploit that. I don't know if we have the quarterbacks to exploit what he could do. So no, really at the second, third, depending on the other positions, I could see them doing it. For me, no.
Well, one of the things before Dave weighs in on this, what I'm struggling with too is I still don't know what on offense and defense. I don't know what this coaching staff is trying to do. It seems like, based on what we've seen, this regime likes wide receivers who are smart. So I would look at smart guys. That's why I'm a little bit. I wonder if, like, I know size high on that, but that Savion Williams, I'm not sure they're looking for projects like that. But they seem to like guys who are smart that can play all three positions. And Dable seems to have a thing for guys that are quick and fast. So I look at this wide receiver group and I see, again, there are different flavors here. There are a lot of quick. So the Jalen Knowles, I could see the Giants being very high on because he's that kind of quick. And the Kyle Williams, I could see Dable personally liking that kind of guy. But then I wonder, the bigger guys in this draft, and there's guys in here that I really like. I'm trying to wrap my head around, does Dable draft somebody like that? So that's part of me struggling with this is I like certain guys, but it's kind of like we were mentioning earlier with the defensive line when John was bringing it up about I have a hard time seeing the Giants drafting an end when they don't seem to use the ends. I'm having a hard time saying, boy, there's some big wide receivers in this draft, but they're not as explosive. So are they even on the radar screen? So I just want to lead into. So Dave, I don't know if you've got to want to react to that. Plus, combine that with who are your, like, I don't know, top 3-5 guys out of the first round that you would not mind the Giants taking a shot at.
So in the context of if somebody fell, who would be that guy that I could see them taking at the top of the second round? It would be Emeka Egbuka at Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think he's going to fall? No. But would he be a talent that you pretty much shouldn't pass up on there? Sure. And he does fit the flavor of what they like out of like the speedy, shifty guys, what have you. I think that we desperately need some more size. The three names that I really like are the Jaden Higgins, Trey Harris, Jack Becks of the world. Those are physical wide receivers. They've got good size to them. Jack Beck is one that had a fantastic Senior Bowl when the game was on the line. He catches the winning touchdown. The tragedy with his brother, all those things sort of factor in, but just character-wise, exactly what the Giants would be looking for. Jaden Higgins, obviously much taller, 6'4" kind of guy, incredible talent. Everybody's kind of focused on Knoll, but Higgins is a name that's up there. And then Trey Harris is one that kind of like Jack Sawyer fluctuates all over the place. Some people have him at the top of the second. Some people have him at the bottom of the third. It really just depends on how all that shakes out. But I don't think I would go wide receiver at the top of the second unless Egbuka was there. It's more something that I would look at in the third round if one of those other guys, Beck, Harris, or Higgins, was still sitting there and fell in my lap.
Is Higgins being too underrated by people? I think he's much better. He's not, I don't, let me put it this way. By fans, I don't hear him being talked about enough. Higgins. I think Higgins.
Maybe not by fans, but in scouting circles, he's talked about all the time, has been for a while. So I think within,
I'm sorry. Does he fall out of the first round? I don't think so, right? Does he, or could he?
Higgins?
Higgins,
yeah, I think Higgins is out of the first round.
Oh, you do?
Higgins good.
Okay, so would you have a problem with them taking Higgins at 34?
I think it's a little rich for wide receiver. I don't think that I don't think it's an incredible wide receiver draft, but I would rather wait until I don't think that the value is going to intersect there to take somebody like Higgins. There's going to be a defensive lineman, an offensive lineman, a quarterback, whatever, that tight end, if a Colston Loveland falls to you or something, or you really love a Mason Taylor or Elijah Arroyo, I think that's rich for them, but it could happen. So I just don't see that value lining up where taking Higgins at 34 would make sense. But again, we could have said the same thing about Tyler Nubin last year. So it's not to say it's an impossibility.
All right. Let's, because I want to keep this moving in there. There's so much. So offensive linemen, we only touched on very briefly. So 34 and 65 names that you like.
So
Are you a Donovan Jackson guy or no?
not opposed to him. I see the value in him, but am I like? Yeah, I mean, I'm not against him. Gray's able, just
He'd be
because
perfect.
the position versatility there would make a ton of sense to me. Donovan Jackson. If Kelvin Banks somehow fell, I could see that. Josh Simmons, but like 34. I don't know.
65 is your spot, right? Is that where you're looking at offensive line at 65 or?
Even later potentially.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like you could get Tate Ratledge type. You could get.
Do you think he makes it to 65? Ratledge?
Yeah, I could see it.
Okay.
Jared Wilson is another guy out of that Georgia program that I don't think people talk about enough. He's really solid. It depends on like what their prioritization is on the offensive line, because if they feel like when I brought Paul Dottino on the show and he's like, they signed James Hudson and Forsyth and they've got Thomas and Illuminor, and in a panic situation, you could still throw Evan Neal out there at tackle. So is tackle really going to be an emphasis by comparison to the interior side of things? I'm still really high on John Michael Schmitz, but you've got the Jonah Monheims out of USC, the Josh Grays, Seth McLaughlin, some later guys, Drew Kendall, Eli Cox, Jake Majors, Willie Lampkin is a kid out of UNC that I really struggle to get behind from a size standpoint, but guy was a former wrestler. You want to take a stab on somebody in the 7th round, like that could end up making sense. But I think that they end up going with more of the guard types, a Garrett Dellinger out of LSU, a Luke Kandra out of Cincinnati. And then you get later the Connor Colby's, the Dylan Fairchilds. Luke Newman is a kid out of Michigan State that I really like. Miles Frazier at LSU. And then Hayden Connor out of Texas, Tyler Cooper out of Minnesota, and my boy Joe Huber out of Wisconsin. There's a lot of quality depth there that,
like a Miles Frazier, they could get later in the draft.
Yeah, they could get him on day 3. And that's my thing is like, do I see that much? I mean, if you're looking at like a Jackson Slater on day 2, or Jonah Savania, am I convinced that those guys are eons better than a bunch of the names I just rattled through that I could get on day 3? I don't think so.
I was going to ask you about Savania. I was going to ask you about him too.
Yeah.
He seems like a giant-like player. That's the only reason I brought him up.
Yeah. No, I mean, don't get me wrong. Stout guy.
Guard, tackle, flexibility.
Again, I just think where he's going to go, there's going to be better positional value elsewhere that we should look at because we can get quality depth later on day 3.
Okay, I want to hear John and your views on the running backs, but what I'm running into my head when I'm listening to you, Dave, is I'm throwing scenarios out, and I'm still trying to find out where you're at at 34 and 65. Like in a draft, what are you hitting at those spots? Because I keep hearing you say I would hit those later in the draft. So where are you looking at 34 and 65?
So I don't want to go. It's unrealistic to go into it expecting anything, which is why I'm kind of floating around. You know what I mean? Float like a butterfly. But because you just have no idea how it's going to fall. You have no idea who's going to call you. I think that there is a ton of, which is why I'm huge on let's trade down and amass more picks, because then I can, buckshot this a little bit more across the board and fill a variety of holes. So I think that there's a lot of quality depth, but yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm like married to anything, which is kind of what Joe Shane has been saying, right? Like we wanted to fill a bunch of holes so we're not forced into anything and we can let the draft come to us. And then we can assess optionality in the moment trade down, trade up, whatever it ends up being. So I'm not really married to, I've got to get this position at this point or that position at that point. You can find quality depth throughout this entire draft, but I think like one that really falls off is tight end, and how much are we going to prioritize tight end? Running back is another one that's super deep if you want to get into the running backs. And how confident are you in Tracy, and how much are you going to run him into the ground and basically waste his career if you don't supplement him with somebody who can tote the rock on a more regular basis, right? Like, do they just need a change of pace guy because they got Motor Singletary, they got Turbo Miller, Eric Gray's the odd man out in that room right now, so you're kind of looking to replace him. But can you do that again on day 3? I think that you can. If Cam Scadaboo's sitting there, like, I love Cam Scadaboo.
You do. So you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I love.
I just like the name.
I knew that was going to come up, and I knew I was going to be on the other side of the equation on that one. What
do you? So wait, you don't like him, John?
It's not that I don't like him. I don't want him for us. You put him on a different team with a different way of running it. You put him on a Baltimore. You put him on a Pittsburgh. I think he's going to be fine. You put him with us. I think it's going to be a wasted pick.
But he brought, and I thought the same thing. But then they bring him in for a 30 visit.
I'm not surprised that they're doing it. It's not what I would do. I want to change a pace guy. I want a bigger, thicker back to give, because then Tracy, you can get the same production but not increase the amount of work that he gets. I think if you can just give him the same amount of work as last year, give me another guy that can come in with a little more size. I want a guy who comes in and compound. I want to be able to change it up when I need to. And really, if I need to dictate and kind of control the clock, and I want Tracy's his touches to be maximized, not increase the number of touches.
Scadaboo is such an interesting guy because you look at him, and he would have been perfect for the 1980s or before, and he's so built low, his center of gravity is so low to the ground, and he's got these short little legs, but he just punishes people. I mean, it's funny. And like, John, I agree with you. I thought, you know what? Dable's not going to bring this guy in, but he can catch the ball. That's the other thing. At least it looks like he can catch the ball. And if you want to bring some physicality to this, now another guy that Dave mentioned, when I was on his show earlier, he told me to start watching Martinez out of Miami.
Yeah.
He's another guy that I'm like, he's interesting because he didn't start off the year very well, but he ended up on a very high note. And some of his runs, his physical runs, are like, damn, and he can catch. And he's another one. I think the Giants are going to look at running backs that can catch. Where I'm, again, struggling is, do they get the physical guy to complement Tyrone Tracy, sort of like the thunder and lightning kind of thing? Or do they just bring in another guy that's like the home run hitter type that will get the 10 to 12, maybe 15 carries a game, that just spells Tracy? And there's both those guys in this draft, and it's a very deep draft, and there's a lot of guys that I'm like, and I don't know if Dave feels the same way. I'm seeing like really good running backs, again, falling late into like the 4th, 5th round that probably normally shouldn't go that far. Yeah. And so, Dave's probably not going to like this guy. I don't know. I mean, Dave threw out a bunch of names to me the other day, and I was trying to write them down. But one of the guys that he just catches my eye is Tootin, the running back. Now I know he's got a fumbling issue, but when I watch him, to me he's very but he's a guy that could last into the draft. Cy hit him I think 16th on his list, but I was like, damn, I wouldn't mind getting him. Again,
it goes back to how much of a priority is running back, because if you really need somebody, then sure, at the top of the 2nd round, a Hampton or a Judkins, you want that big body bruiser that complement Tracy, then makes a ton of sense. But when you're looking at the value that you can get later on in day 2, day 3, it's like, okay, well, is running back that big of a need for us that we need to allocate a top of basically a borderline 1st round pick on a running back? I don't know. It depends how they're looking at it in the building. But yeah, you can look at guys. I do like Damian Martinez a lot. Mullings out of Michigan, Minajee out of Rutgers, Raheem Sanders is a kid I really like out of South
I like
Carolina.
Sanders. So you like
Yep.
Sanders too? I like
Yeah.
Sanders.
But
Yeah,
I haven't heard Caleb Johnson yet though from Iowa.
So yeah, no, I'm not. Caleb Johnson is more of a one-dimensional guy to me. He can catch, but Iowa always has a really good offensive line. No surprise to anybody. So I think that he benefited a bit out of that. He's a bowling ball, but when you're looking at how high most people are projecting him to go, when I could get a Scadaboo or Martinez a little bit after him or around him, like I'd rather go that route by comparison. Like if you want a Caleb Johnson guy, Phil Maffa out of Clemson, who's like a 7th round undrafted free agent type of guy, 6'1", 230 something. You want a bowling ball, like you can get that in him much later on, or potentially as an undrafted free agent signing. So I'm just not in love with Caleb.
Well, James Jordan's kind of like that too, isn't out on Oregon? He's more of a big physical guy too. So, so here's where I'm struggling too. So we know Hampton came in for a 30 visit, and Hampton, if you're going to draft him, you're hoping he falls out of the first round and you get him at 34. I think a lot of Giants fans would be scratching their heads if the Giants took him, except he may be so good that they can't pass on them. I mean, how do you view Hampton? I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't see it with Judkins. I'm not really sure the hype. Maybe I don't know. Part of my problem is I know Ohio State is so damn good. So sometimes I wonder when we're looking. So I fell victim to this back in the day when I used to watch the old Ron Dane and Tyrone Wheatley highlights. And sometimes you got to look at the size of the hole these guys were having their big runs on. So I always discount the runs where the hole is so massive that and you see the highlight and you're like, wow, look at that 60-yard run. Yeah, but he had a mammoth hole to run in that he's not going to get that in the NFL. So I almost discount those kinds of runs. And I don't know how you feel about Judkins, but I don't see that. I don't see the same elite prospect with him, for instance. I wouldn't spend a high pick on him.
Yeah, I'm just not enamored enough with the need of running back being that high in this draft, particularly with the depth of that position. So again, I'm not going to look to allocate that sort of capital. If you want like my roadmap of an ideal world for me personally,
yes,
and somehow, some way, it would be like Tyler Warren in the first, Jihad Campbell the top of the second, and then sort out the trenches running back the rest of the way.
So you're a big Jihad Campbell guy.
I'm a huge Jihad Campbell guy.
That's interesting. Yep. Okay, because he's another guy that I see different opinions on him. I see people all over. Some people really, really love him, and some people are like, And again, not like he's not first round, but I just see people like, I don't know. So that's interesting.
When I put on his tape, he can blitz. He can stuff the run. He can drop into coverage. He is a leader. He is everything I want in a field general at the inside linebacker position. And inside linebacker, to me, is an area of question where you've got Bobby Okereke is going to fit into this system. And then are you going to like re-sign him after this deal runs out? Or are you going to need some sort of replacement there? Micah McFadden is serviceable. You need two interior linebackers in this defense, like behind them, you got Deontay Johnson, who's had injury issues. He drafted Darius Muasau last year, there's like some okay bodies there, but right. Jihad Campbell is like an absolute playmaker, changes that room entirely, gives you that field general, the versatility. Like he is the size. He's right there on the size spectrum for me. So he just checks a ton of boxes, and I could see him slipping to the top of the second round. And then again, a lot of the other positions. So Tyler Warren, Jihad Campbell, like Darian Porter, maybe at the top of the third. And then I'm looking at, the running backs, bottom of the third, top of the fourth, maybe there's a value of like Cam Scattaboo or some Damian Martinez there.
Yeah.
And then I'm filling up the trenches with the rest of my picks, just double dipping on the defensive and offensive lines.
See, I've run simulations where I've dropped down, taken Warren. So that's interesting that you said that, John. So again, where I'm struggling with this is if they take Abdul Carter, and you've got Thibodeau and you've got Burns. Now, Carter was an off-ball linebacker for his first 2 years at Penn State. So where I am at right now, without watching a lot of Penn State games, I'm envisioning Bowen playing Carter early, almost in the inside linebacker position. And then as we get into pass rush situations, you still keep Burns, Thibodeau, and Carter on the field, and you have your NASCAR, your NASCAR package. Because if you draft Carter, you can't sit Thibodeau, you can't sit Burns, you can't sit Carter. If you do, picking Carter doesn't make any sense, because why are you paying Burns that money? Why did you draft Thibodeau? You didn't draft Thibodeau to sit on the bench. So I'm trying to figure out how they get all three players on it. So both of you, but starting with John, do you see Carter being kind of an inside linebacker on this team half the time? I do, but I'm not sure if I'm way off on this.
You certainly could. The Cowboys had Parsons playing inside, and then they moved him outside, and then he plays kind of defensive end. And you could easily start him there. What you can't do is you can't start him on the outside, and then Thibodeau doesn't go anywhere else. He goes to the bench. Burns would go to the bench. I mean, you wouldn't. Right. There's no other spot to put them. He can be moved. He can play, and then you can bring and go three guys plus Lawrence rushing the passer later. So he does bring you positional versatility that way. He can play other positions early on. And again, we're going to pick up Thibodeau's fifth-year option. But beyond that, I can't, unless he really starts to produce more, I don't see the Giants giving him a ginormous second contract. So you really want that insurance piece. So I think, yes, Carter could play inside. Then that second pick, I think if you go that route, then you pretty much have to go, if the need falls there, you're either going defensive tackle or you're going cornerback. But I agree with Dave when you asked the question about what would you do. You can't marry your mind to I'm going to get this position, because now I'm going to convince myself no matter how things fall, I'm going to purposely go, yep, that's because we decided we got to have a defensive tackle. I'm just saying, depending on if they drop, if the tackles drop or the corners drop, those just fit. Nothing else really fits unless one of the offensive linemen that you had rated really high slid. And then you could go, okay, I can see, but he's got to be able to play guard tackle. So yes, I think Carter can play inside linebacker, and I would do that. I want all the guys on the field. I got to have them play. That also helps you with Okereke, because I think he's the one guy who's the odd man out eventually. I don't think they're thrilled with him right now after last year for whatever reason. And I think they like McFadden a lot more than I think a lot of other people do. And you can protect McFadden if you have the better D line up front and somebody else, because now he can just scrape and run and whatever. But if he's taking guards on fully, we talked about this the other night on Giants Rush. If he's taking on the guards fully, they're coming through unblocked to take him. McFadden's size gets completely just obliterated. But if he can scrape and move without, and you've got some, now all of a sudden you got a guy. So yeah, I think Carter could play inside, help you out.
One of the things about Carter that I've noticed on the tape is he's so goddamn fast, even from the inside linebacker spot. Not just blitzing, but like on screens and outside runs. He is so much faster than everybody else on the field. He's not a big physical guy, but he gets to the ball. So I'm thinking he might work out there. And so the only other option to me, and before we get to Dave, John, I want to hear your thought on this too, John. Is Thibodeau on the market if you draft Carter? Are they shopping him, even including the night of the draft?
I wouldn't think so, because then you basically created a plus scenario and then deducted one of the pieces. Now,
okay,
mid-season, if the Giants start out poorly and Thibodeau's playing okay and someone wants to come looking, then I'm looking to next year anyway. But I would think right off, you wouldn't add Carter to just get rid of Thibodeau on that night, unless somebody just offered you something crazy. I would think the Giants aren't going to actively shop him. I don't know what anybody else thinks, but I wouldn't think that, at least not until the season starts.
Okay. And Dave, what would you do with the three linebackers? I mean,
I think that if you draft Carter that Kayvon goes to the bench, and you hope that it lights a fire under Kayvon, and then that gives you a better understanding of what you're going to get out of him. Like, how does he react to a scenario like that where you just drafted his replacement, you started his replacement over him? There's also sort of the dichotomy of, well, what's up with his injuries, and is he going to be ready to start the season, or is he going to, come in later in the fall or what have you? So you have that dynamic going for you as well. But I think that more likely than not, Kayvon takes a back seat to Carter. You see how Kayvon reacts to that. If he might get pissed and demand a trade. He might say, shit, the writing's on the wall for me here. I've really got to play out to get a contract with somebody else and not end up in like the low to mid-tier money because somebody's just taking me as like a has-been who could resurrect their career, but maybe not. Like, that would just put a lot more fire under his ass going into this year to showcase what ceiling he could live up to or not. And I don't think that it's bad to have a multitude of pass rushers. So, is there a package where you could put Carter's hand in the dirt and then have Thibodeau there at outside linebacker? Sure. Or put like both their hands in the dirt and then have Burnt. Like, there's a lot of optionality there, but I don't know if I would see Carter so much as an inside linebacker versus an edge. It could happen. Again, it depends on how convoluted they want to make this defense, but I don't think that they can make it overly complex because the players aren't going to be able to keep up with it. You know what I mean? That's one of the bigger issues.
If you have that mindset to move Thibodeau and Carter, if you get Carter, you move Thibodeau to the bench. Would you, because they don't have to do it until well after the draft, do you pick up his 5th year so you control that extra year? Or do you say, let's let him prove it this and then we'll deal with it later?
I think it would be stupid not to pick up the 5th year, just because if there is a potential to trade him, it's more beneficial for somebody to have
the extra year.
Where it's like you get him on a deal, you don't have to pay him immediately, so you could get more back for him.
Right. Good call. All right.
So we're at the 2-hour mark. I could go another 2 hours, but I think
I knew we would probably set a record with this one. But
you know what we didn't address? We didn't address safety.
Well, hopefully
we're not going to do that again. If we take a safety in the 2nd round,
God help it. Nick Emanuele sitting there would be tempting, but
the concern is we draft the safety in the 2nd round multiple years under this regime, and then we go sign a safety in free agency to a huge deal. So it's like, okay, guys, either get this shit right here sooner or later, or let's not be dropping a ton of money. But we draft another one. I don't know. That'd be pretty shocking.
We should do this again, and again, we have a couple weeks still. But I mean, I would have liked to have really gone into the defensive tackles. I applaud Dave for giving me a bunch of names of the 3rd day guys. I wanted to talk about some of the second day guys that I'm like, and we won't get into it now, but there are so many good defensive tackles that are going to be there on the 2nd day. And again, and on the 3rd day too. That's why I double dip on these. I always, and all these things, I'm like, there's somebody there. And that's why I really like the point Dave made early. And again, I'm repeating myself. I have gotten in the positions where there are so many good defensive tackles available. Even after I've taken 2, I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have taken that defensive tackle at 34 because there's so many in this draft, and I could have used that pick at another spot. So that's a really good way to look at this. That being said, there are some really top tier defensive tackles in this draft that I think are going to fall to us at 34, and I would have a hard time passing on them. And the same thing with the offensive line. I don't love this offensive line class. I'm glad Dave likes a lot of the day 2, day 3 guys. Sounds like more day 3 because a lot of these guys I think aren't ideal for the Giants. I'm not. I mean, even the guys that are rated at the very top. I mean, I'm a little bit gun shy of Alabama linemen now. That's the Evan Neal effect. So even the guys.
Well, it's not just Evan Neal
at all.
Yeah. It's Alex Leatherwood. I mean, it's there's a number of them that have not lived up to the hype.
Yeah, so part of that's my baggage. So I'm like, so anyways, I'm never drafting a Duke quarterback again, and I'm a little nervous about Alabama offensive lineman. Okay, but
I'll say I think some of the offensive linemen later, they tend to be guys that are perceived with less ceiling. They might be more position specific. So I'm kind of okay if they get a center later that all he is a center. If you draft him later, because you might find a guy and he might be a diamond in the rough that we could just say that's ultimately the guy. What I don't like is I like position versatility, but the Giants have been doing it oddly backwards in the draft. Free agency, we've been getting guys that could be tackle guards.
right.
We draft guards and then expect them to play tackle as well, and that has not worked out well. So I would rather we look for some tackles that could play guard, which is why the one is able the tackle. He could also play. He literally can play guard. He can play center. I mean, he has those abilities. I want a guy like that. And Monheim, from USC, can play tackle. If you had to kick him out, he's played outside before. I want a guy, if he's my backup center, if we have a rash injuries, I could put him somewhere else, save me for a week, at a position. That I'm hoping the Giants look deeper in the draft, 5th, 6th round, get some guys that might have lower ceilings, but you could count on them. They could be the lunch pail guys, and they tend to be the ones you can really play around. And that Willie Lampkin, North Carolina, I think he's going to end up in Baltimore, and I think they're going to move him to fullback. Just saying.
Yeah, that could make a lot of sense.
I would have a hard time passing on Zabel. If Zabel somehow gets out of the first round and gets past Cleveland, I'd have a hard time because
it makes a ton of sense.
He can play anywhere too. I mean and he comes from a program that has a history of pumping out linemen, good NFL linemen, and why 28 pointed out. I didn't know this. Kubas and him are best buddies. They're like. I know that shouldn't play a factor in who you draft, but apparently those guys are. So part of me is like, let's get that because I would take their offensive line in college maybe more than our offensive line. But they always pump out offensive linemen. That program.
I love reuniting players into a team because it makes the transition for the rookie so much easier because they come in, they know somebody who they're friends with, who can show them the ropes and all that kind of stuff. So
look at the Eagles with Georgia, the defense,
right?
Yeah,
yep. A lot of continuity.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So we
should. I think. I mean, it was. We went over 2 hours. I once again. I know. I told my wife. I think we're going to be a hard 1 hour. She knew not to believe me. She knew not to believe me.
I could go 2 more hours on this.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah. Well, let's get caught up again. I can tell you because I'm not worried about it. I am locking in Jordan Renan for the end of this coming week, so we're just nailing down the day. He said he'll come on, so we'll talk to him. We've made our way through most of the media guys, so now we'll have Jordan coming on. But yeah, Dave, we should. I would definitely be up for doing this. I can go pretty deep on the draft. I love the draft talk, so it'll be curious. It really talking about the draft overall. It's. The question kept coming up, what would you do? What would you do? And a lot of it really is, I want to see what some of these other teams are going to do. Once we pick at 3, like you said, it's not really that hard to figure out. It's either we ultimately trade out of there or there's 3 guys. I mean, there's 3 guys the Giants are going to possibly go with. Sanders being the outlier. Then you got Carter Hunter. Those are really the guys you can pretty much count on.
Agreed.
It's after that. It's what does everybody else do? And then who falls through, and that's where it gets kind of exciting. So yeah, let's get caught up again, and of course, subscribe, all that good stuff. And for that, we're going to end it, and I'm going to finish my Sunday, and then we will get back to this next week. Thanks for watching, and we'll.